The inheritance. Marcus preferred the company of parchment to people. His small, precisely ordered apartment, a testament to his methodical nature, was invariably cool, even in summer. Bookshelves, crafted from dark, unyielding oak, lined every wall, their contents meticulously catalogued and cross-referenced. Here, amidst the faint, dry scent of aged paper and leather, he found a profound, almost monastic satisfaction. He was a historian, a meticulous archaeologist of forgotten texts, and the world outside his window rarely intruded on his carefully constructed solitude. The intrusion arrived in the form of a thick, cream-colored envelope, delivered by a uniformed courier who looked distinctly uncomfortable on Marcus's quiet street. Inside, the formal script of a solicitor's firm announced the unexpected passing of a distant, practically unknown relative. A great-aunt, he vaguely recalled, whom he had met precisely once at a childhood funeral. The letter's core message, however, caused a flicker of genuine surprise to cross Marcus's usually impassive features. He was the sole heir to Blackwood Manor. Blackwood Manor. The name itself carried a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the local gossip, a whisper of neglect and a reputation for peculiar, unsettling occurrences. Marcus, a man who dealt exclusively in verifiable facts and documented evidence, had always dismissed such tales as the predictable effluvium of rural superstition. It was simply the human mind's tendency to invent narratives where logic failed to provide immediate answers. He folded the letter, a thin line forming between his brows. The inheritance was an inconvenience, a disruption to his carefully curated existence, but also a new historical subject, albeit one of personal provenance. A week later, Marcus found himself driving a rented, unremarkable sedan into the foothills. The landscape grew increasingly stark, the trees taller and more tightly packed, their branches interlacing overhead to form a dim, skeletal canopy. The road narrowed, eventually becoming a single-track lane that wound precariously through a mountain pass. He observed the steep drops, the granite outcroppings, the way the light struggled to penetrate the dense foliage. There was a raw, untamed quality to the environment, a quiet immensity that made the vehicle feel small and vulnerable. He noted the details, cataloging them as he would any historical landscape, yet a faint, unfamiliar prickle of unease began to manifest beneath his usual composure. It was not fear, he told himself, but the natural apprehension of unfamiliar terrain. The GPS signal wavered, then died, leaving him to navigate by the increasingly sparse and faded road signs. Blackwood Manor, when it finally appeared, was less a destination and more a looming, monolithic presence. Turrets, their slate caps chipped and green with moss, pierced the low-hanging clouds. Windows, narrow and numerous, stared out like vacant eyes from the grimy stone facade. The only sound was the distant, mournful sigh of the wind through the ancient pines that ringed the estate. A wrought iron gate, rusted and half obscured by ivy, stood ajar, its hinges groaning softly as if in complaint. He drove through, the gravel crunching beneath the tires, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. The front doors, massive slabs of blackened oak studded with iron, stood slightly ajar, inviting or perhaps simply unable to fully close after decades of neglect. A faint, cloying odor reached him, a composite of damp earth, stagnant water, and something else. Something subtly metallic and profoundly ancient, like the smell of forgotten crypts. He pushed the heavy door open further, the resistance surprisingly slight, and stepped into the cavernous entrance hall. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of weak gray light that penetrated the tall, grimy windows. Tapestries, brittle and faded, hung in tatters from the walls, their original vibrant colors reduced to muted, indistinct patterns. Marcus felt a subtle pressure, not physical, but a weight upon his perception, as if the very atmosphere of the house pressed against his mind. It was not fear, he rationalized, but the natural disquiet of encountering such profound decay. Yet, The house felt less like a relic of the past and more like an entity holding its breath, waiting. He tightened his grip on the strap of his satchel. His skepticism remained, but it was now overlaid with an undeniable layer of tension, a fine, almost imperceptible hum beneath his skin. The journey to the manor was a study in geological shifts. The flat, ordered farmlands gave way to rolling hills, then to the jagged, unforgiving ascent of the mountain pass. Marcus, accustomed to the quiet hum of his apartment, found the wind's howl through the crags a raw, unsettling sound. The vehicle, a hired estate car laden with his carefully packed research, strained against the incline. He'd chosen this isolation deliberately, a crucible for his upcoming work, a place where the past could truly speak without modern interference. The estate agent, a man whose cheerfulness seemed forced, had merely pointed to the winding dirt track that diverged from the main road, a final gesture before retreating back to civilization. The manor loomed, not grandly, but with a kind of weathered permanence. Stone, dark and unyielding, comprised its walls, the slate roof a deep charcoal against the bruised sky. Inside, the air was thick with disuse, a scent of dust, damp stone, and something else, a faint metallic tang Marcus couldn't quite place. He surveyed the cavernous main hall, his gaze dismissive of the local superstitions. There was no malevolence here, only neglect. He began the methodical process of transforming one of the smaller, less imposing ground floor rooms into his study. This room, tucked away from the main thoroughfare, offered a single window overlooking a tangle of overgrown gardens. It was here that he would construct his intellectual fortress. Box after box, he unloaded his meticulously catalogued books, volumes on obscure European nobility, treatises on ancient land disputes, collections of local folklore he intended to debunk. His hands, accustomed to the delicate touch required for fragile manuscripts, moved with purpose. Each book found its designated place on the tall, empty shelves, the wood groaning faintly under the new weight. Hours bled into one another. The afternoon light, weak and watery, faded, replaced by the stark glow of the single bulb he'd screwed into the ceiling fixture. A chill, more profound than the general cold of the old house, settled around him. It wasn't uniform. It seemed to coalesce in specific pockets, particularly near the fireplace, which was choked with fallen mortar. Marcus paused, rubbing his arms. He attributed it to a draft, perhaps a faulty seal around the chimney. He made a mental note to inspect the masonry later. It was like the rustle of dry leaves, or perhaps a sigh carried on a distant breeze. He stopped, listening intently. Nothing. His mind, ever analytical, concluded it was the house itself, contracting in the cooling air. A very old structure, he reminded himself, made its own peculiar noises. He continued his work, the rhythm of unpacking and sorting a comforting constant. He placed a stack of leather-bound notebooks on a small, scarred oak desk. He turned to retrieve a box of index cards from the floor, his back to the desk for only a moment. When he turned back, a single notebook, one he distinctly remembered placing squarely in the center of the stack, now lay slightly askew, its corner jutting out over the edge of the desk. Marcus frowned. He hadn't touched it. The movement was minimal, almost negligible, easily dismissed. A vibration from the floorboards, perhaps. Or the stack wasn't as stable as he thought. He reached out and straightened it, his fingers brushing the cool, aged leather. His determination to impose order here was absolute. He moved on to a dusty, built-in cabinet in a far corner of the room, thinking it might serve for storing research notes. The hinges protested with a drawn-out shriek as he pulled open the heavy wooden door. Inside, behind a layer of cobwebs and a few desiccated insect husks, lay a small, lead-lined chest. It was not locked, merely latched. A strange tremor, not of fear but of professional excitement, coursed through him. This was the kind of unexpected discovery that fueled his passion. He carefully lifted the chest onto the desk. The lid creaked open, revealing not gold or jewels, but a collection of bound journals and loose, yellowed letters. Their script was spidery and faded, the ink bleeding into the paper in places. He picked up the topmost journal. The first few pages detailed mundane household expenses, but as he flipped deeper, the entries shifted. The handwriting grew erratic, the lines slanting precariously. One passage, dated almost 2 centuries prior, caught his eye. The walls listen. They breathe. My thoughts are not my own anymore. He sees what I write. It is not the season, but the house itself. It desires. Marcus's initial scholarly interest sharpened, tinged now with a subtle unease. These weren't just the ramblings of eccentrics. The accounts, though disparate in time, echoed a similar theme of encroaching mental erosion, a struggle against an insidious, unnamed force. He ran a finger over the brittle paper, the texture like dried skin. He had come here seeking a quiet place to work, to immerse himself in the detached pursuit of historical truth. He had found something else entirely. The winding ascent of the mountain pass had given way to a final, precipitous drop. Marcus guided the rented vehicle down the gravel track, the engine groaning in protest, until the ancient manor materialized through a screen of skeletal trees. It was larger than photographs suggested. A sprawling, asymmetrical edifice of dark stone and unforgiving angles. Its windows like vacant eyes staring out from under heavy brows of slate. A profound silence enveloped the grounds, broken only by the crunch of tires on gravel and the distant, mournful cry of an unseen bird. He felt a peculiar pressure in the air, a stillness that seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust, damp stone, and something else. A faint metallic tang he couldn't quite place. His footsteps echoed unnervingly on the polished flagstones of the entrance hall. He spent the first few hours methodically unpacking his research materials, setting up his laptop on a vast, dust-shrouded dining table that seemed to stretch into the gloom. Each movement felt amplified. The rustle of paper, the click of his keyboard, all swallowed by the cavernous space before rebounding in distorted echoes. That evening, as dusk bled into a moonless night, the first subtle intrusions began. It was indistinct, a fleeting sibilance, like dry leaves scuttling across a stone floor. Marcus paused, his fingers still tracing a line of text. He glanced around the empty room, attributing the sound to the house settling, or perhaps the wind finding a way through a loose pane. The manor was old, after all. He resumed reading, but the edge of his concentration had dulled. Nothing. Sleep offered no respite. His nights became a fragmented landscape of vivid, disorienting nightmares. He heard a chorus of muffled cries, a cacophony of pleas just beyond the threshold of understanding, and the unsettling sensation of being watched, not by a single entity, but by the very fabric of the house itself. He would wake abruptly, gasping for breath, the phantom echoes of those cries clinging to the edges of his awareness, the scent of dust and damp stone inexplicably stronger in his bedroom. Determined to find a rational explanation for his unease, Marcus plunged into the manor's archives. The previous owner, a distant relative, had been an amateur historian himself, meticulously cataloging generations of family documents, letters, and journals. Marcus spent days poring over brittle parchments and faded ink, the smell of decay clinging to his fingertips. What he found instead was a disturbing pattern. The records revealed a succession of residents who, like him, had sought extended periods of isolation within the manor's walls. There were the detailed, if increasingly erratic, entries of an 18th century recluse who chronicled his slow descent into paranoia, convinced the house spoke to him, that its walls held secrets. His final entry was a scrawled, desperate plea for release, followed by an abrupt blank page. A century later, a young, ambitious scholar, drawn to the manor for its extensive library, meticulously documented his own unraveling. His handwriting grew frantic, His observations spiraled into delusion, describing phantom figures and an insidious drain on his vitality, before his journal simply ceased. There were other, less detailed accounts. A merchant who vanished without a trace after a year of secluded residence. A widowed artist found deceased in his study. The official cause of death listed as suicide, though the accompanying note was said to be an incoherent jumble of accusations against the stone heart of the house. Each individual, initially rational and robust, had succumbed to a similar fate. Madness, disappearance, or suicide, always preceded by prolonged, uninterrupted residence within the manor. He had dismissed local legends as mere superstition, but these were not folkloric tales. These were documented lives, meticulously recorded in their own hands. As he closed the last journal, its pages crumbling at his touch, a distinct, guttural sigh seemed to emanate from the wall directly behind him. It was not the wind, nor the settling of old timbers. It was a sound of profound exhalation, heavy with an ancient weariness. Marcus froze, every muscle tensed. The house was not merely old, it was alive, and it was listening. Marcus had spent the first few days within the manor's sprawling confines in a state of meticulous observation. He cataloged its decaying grandeur, the ornate but dust-choked furniture, the tapestries that bled their colors into the aged walls. He moved with the precise movements of a researcher, his skepticism a shield against the pervasive chill that seemed to emanate not from drafts, but from the very stone. He dismissed the local tales as the fanciful exaggerations of an isolated community, finding rational explanations for every creak and groan the old house offered. A settling beam, a shifting foundation, the wind whistling through a broken pane. These were the logical culprits. Then the dreams began. They were not conventional dreams, dissolving upon waking, but lingered like a physical residue. He would wake, heart a dull thrum against his ribs, to the distinct scent of pipe tobacco and stale brandy, though he neither smoked nor drank brandy. Once he heard the faint, mournful strains of a cello, a melody that felt ancient and sorrowful, though no instrument resided in his current vicinity. He would dismiss them, attributing them to the stress of relocation, the unfamiliar surroundings. But the visions were different. They started subtly, mere flickers at the edge of his perception. A shadow that moved too quickly in his peripheral vision, a momentary impression of a figure standing in a doorway he had just passed. He would turn, his scholarly composure momentarily ruffled, only to find empty space, the air still and heavy. He blamed fatigue, optical illusions. One afternoon, while examining a collection of leather-bound journals in the cavernous library, the air thickened. The dust motes, usually dancing in the sunbeams that pierced the grimy windows, seemed to freeze. He shivered, pulling his cardigan tighter. He was examining a journal dated 1887, its brittle pages filled with a flowing, elegant script. The entry detailed a most vexing incident involving the disappearance of a young woman, a housemaid. As his eyes traced the words, the room around him began to waver. The ornate rug beneath his feet seemed to lose its definition, its pattern blurring into something indistinct. The scent of dust and old paper was momentarily replaced by a sharp metallic tang, like old blood. He looked up, his gaze sweeping the room, his breath catching in his throat. Across the vast expanse of the library, near the towering empty fireplace, a scene began to coalesce. It was faint, translucent, like an image projected onto a fine gauze, yet undeniably present. Her shoulders shook, and the whimpering sound grew slightly louder, a fragile thread of despair. She clutched at her stomach, her face obscured by her tangled hair. He tried to rationalize it. A trick of the light, a momentary lapse in concentration, perhaps the stress manifesting as a hallucination. He stood rooted, his historian's curiosity warring with a primal instinct to flee. The figure of the housemaid shuddered. Then slowly, agonizingly, began to sink into the stone of the fireplace as if being absorbed. The image shimmered, dissolved, and the library returned to its usual silent decay. The metallic tang dissipated, replaced by the familiar scent of dust. Marcus stood, trembling slightly, his hand pressed against the cool, smooth leather of the journal. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He felt disoriented, as if he had just witnessed something profoundly wrong, something that defied all logical explanation. His carefully constructed skepticism, a lifelong edifice, had a hairline crack running through its foundation. There was nothing. No indentation, no lingering scent, just the rough texture of the ancient masonry. The experience left him profoundly shaken. He retreated to his temporary study, a smaller room on the second floor, and attempted to immerse himself in his research, but the image of the vanishing housemaid clung to his mind like a persistent burr. He found himself constantly glancing over his shoulder, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He felt watched, not by a person, but by something vast, unseen, and profoundly ancient. Every creak of the floorboards above, every distant groan of the settling house, seemed imbued with a new, sinister significance. He felt judged, scrutinized, as if his presence was an intrusion, a foreign body within a living organism. The air itself seemed to hum with a subtle, malevolent energy. That night, the visions returned with greater intensity. He was not dreaming. The air grew frigid, and a faint, sweet smell like decaying lilies filled his nostrils. He heard it again. The mournful cello, closer this time, accompanied by a woman's hushed, weeping voice. The sound seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, resonating through the very stones of the manor. He sat up, his body rigid with a fear he refused to name. He tried to tell himself it was the wind, the old pipes, but the sounds were too distinct, too personal. He saw, in the faint moonlight filtering through the tall windows, a faint shimmering outline of a woman in a long flowing gown, standing by the vanity table. Her back was to him, her shoulders shaking. He couldn't make out details, but her form was undeniably human, undeniably present. The cello music swelled, a lament, and the woman's sobs grew louder, a raw, desperate sound that tore at something deep within Marcus. He watched, paralyzed, as the ethereal figure slowly raised a hand, pressing it against her temple, then slowly, agonizingly, began to fade. Marcus lay back, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His determination to remain rational was crumbling. He had witnessed something impossible. Twice. These were not mere hallucinations. They were too vivid, too persistent, too real. The house wasn't just old. It was alive, and it was showing him its memories. It was consuming him, slowly, subtly, blurring the edges of his own reality. The house was watching, and it was waiting. Marcus's initial meticulous observation had deepened, evolving from detached academic interest into an all-consuming fixation. Days bled into one another, marked only by the shifting quality of the light through grimy windows or the rhythmic creak of ancient timbers above. He spent hours in the manor's sprawling library, the air thick with the scent of decaying paper and forgotten dust, his hands stained with the grime of centuries. He unearthed leather-bound ledgers, brittle diaries, and fragmented letters, each document a whisper from a past he was determined to catalog, to dissect. His determination, once a sharp, focused instrument, had become a blunt, unyielding force, pushing him deeper into the manor's intricate web. His clothes, once neatly pressed, were rumpled and bore the faint, pervasive odor of old wood and mildew. Meals were often forgotten, or cobbled together from whatever meager provisions remained, consumed standing in the kitchen's dim light, his thoughts still grappling with some obscure historical notation. The concept of a regular sleep schedule had dissolved. A week, perhaps more, had passed since his last contact with the outside. a vague prickle of obligation surfaced. He should inform his colleague about his progress, or at least confirm his continued existence. He retrieved his mobile phone from a jacket pocket, its screen a blank, unresponsive rectangle. No signal. He tried the manor's ancient landline, but the receiver remained stubbornly silent, a dead weight in his hand. No dial tone, no static, just an absolute void. Such an isolated property, he reasoned, would naturally have unreliable connections. He considered driving into the nearest town, a small cluster of buildings nestled at the foot of the mountain range, beyond the winding mountain pass. He walked to the grand front doors, their heavy oak groaning in protest as he pushed one open a crack. The air outside was crisp, carrying the distant scent of pine and damp earth. He looked out over the overgrown drive, past the skeletal trees, towards the faint, hazy line of the mountain pass in the distance. It looked impossibly far, a journey of significant effort. An inexplicable lethargy settled over him, heavy and pervasive. The thought of navigating the treacherous curves, the mundane interaction with strangers, felt utterly unappealing, almost repellent. The mountain pass, a gateway to the external world, seemed to recede, becoming an irrelevant detail in the vast internal landscape of the manor. The house, in turn, seemed to respond to his deepening immersion. It was not a sudden, dramatic shift, but a gradual, insidious intensification of its presence. He began to perceive a faint, rhythmic hum emanating from the very fabric of the walls, a low vibration that resonated in his chest. The air within the manor often felt heavy, almost viscous, pressing in on him, yet it was not entirely unpleasant. He would pause, straining to discern a movement, a sound, but always there was nothing. He attempted to write a letter to his colleague, a concise summary of his findings, a reassurance of his well-being. He sat at a mahogany desk in the master study, a quill pen scratching faintly on parchment. But his mind wandered, pulled by some half-remembered detail from a diary, a cryptic symbol etched into a beam. The letter remained unfinished, a single paragraph scrawled on the page, forgotten amidst a pile of historical documents. It was a peculiar sensation, like being enveloped in a vast ancient embrace. He was aware, intellectually, that his energy was slowly draining, that his will felt subtly leached. Yet this depletion was accompanied by a perverse sense of belonging. One evening, while cross-referencing a series of obscure land deeds, he stumbled upon a small, leather-bound journal tucked away in a hidden compartment behind a loose panel in a bookcase. Its pages, unlike the others, were filled with a frantic, almost illegible script. The entries, dated nearly 2 centuries prior, detailed the experiences of a previous inhabitant, a scholar named Alistair. Alistair's initial entries mirrored Marcus's own, the meticulous cataloging, the growing fascination. But then the tone shifted. My past unravels, replaced by its hunger. There is no escape, only absorption. He looked at his own unkempt hands, felt the peculiar emptiness behind his eyes, the subtle gaps in his own recollections, the way his personal history felt less vivid than the house's. He recognized the insidious process. The manor wasn't merely haunted. It was a vast, sentient maw, and he, like Alistair, was being consumed. His memories, his sanity, his very life force were being slowly, subtly siphoned away, replaced by the house's own ancient, malevolent consciousness. He felt a part of his self being devoured, and the house, in turn, felt stronger. Its pervasive hum now a deeper, more resonant thrum beneath his feet. He closed the journal, not with horror, but with a profound, unsettling understanding. He was home, and the house had claimed him. A cold clarity had washed over Marcus, a sensation less of understanding and more of absolute, chilling recognition. I am home. The phrase resonated within Marcus, not as a thought, but as a vibration, a deep hum in his bones. He stood in the library, the journal clutched in his hand, and for a fleeting instant, the heavy leather felt like his own skin, the brittle paper like his own dry tongue. He returned to his study, the familiar scent of aged parchment and dust now tinged with something else, a faint metallic tang like old pennies or dried blood. He dismissed it, attributing it to the antique volumes surrounding him. The gas lamp on his desk flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced and stretched, making the very walls seem to breathe. He sat, not in his usual chair, but in a high-backed velvet armchair, a piece he did not recall moving from the drawing room. He frowned, a prickle of unease unsettling his skin. Had he moved it? Or had it always been here? The question hung, unanswered, a tiny fissure in the bedrock of his certainty. The next morning, the disorientation intensified. He woke in a bed he did not recognize, the canopy draped in crimson velvet, a stark contrast to the simple linen he preferred. His room. His room was different. The tall, narrow window now overlooked a dense, ancient forest, not the overgrown rose garden he remembered. He approached the glass, his breath fogging the pane. The trees were gnarled, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers, their leaves a deep, unsettling viridian. Beyond them, in the distance, a formidable mountain pass cut through the landscape, its peaks jagged against a bruised sky. He stared, unblinking, at the impossible vista. The manor was not situated near any mountains. It was surrounded by rolling hills and dense woodland. Yes, but no towering crags or alpine roots. A tremor ran through him. He walked through the house, seeking an explanation, a rational anchor. The grand staircase, usually solid and reassuring, now seemed to undulate, the banister cool and slick beneath his palm, almost wet. He knew every inch of this house. He had studied its blueprints, walked its halls for weeks. Yet new rooms appeared, old ones vanished. The kitchen, with its rustic charm, was replaced by a cavernous, stone-walled chamber, a massive, unlit hearth dominating one wall. A memory surfaced, unbidden. He was walking through a mountain pass, the wind whipping his cloak around him, a heavy satchel slung over his shoulder. The air was thin, sharp with the smell of pine and cold stone. He knew this path. He had traveled it many times, seeking forgotten texts in remote monasteries. He felt the ache in his calves, the bite of the wind on his face. He reached for a hand, a small, trusting hand, but found only empty air. Whose hand was it? His own? A child's? The memory dissolved, leaving behind a profound sense of loss and a dizzying confusion. Had he ever been to a mountain pass? He was a historian, a recluse. His travels had been limited to libraries and archives, not windswept peaks. He returned to his study, the urgent need to consult his own journals, his own notes, overwhelming him. He needed proof of his own life, his own existence. He flung open the desk drawer where he kept his personal diary. It was empty. Not just empty of the diary, but empty of the stacks of correspondence, the old photographs, the small, sentimental trinkets that defined his life. He searched frantically, tearing through papers, overturning books. Nothing. His past, tangible and concrete, had simply vanished. He caught his reflection in a polished silver tray on his desk. And the face. It was his, yes, but subtly altered, thinner, the jawline sharper, a faint scar visible above his left eyebrow, a mark he had never possessed. He reached out, touching the phantom scar, a shiver running down his arm. He heard a faint scratching sound from behind the wall, a rhythmic, insistent tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of a quill on parchment. He knew that sound. He had heard it for weeks, months, years. He was writing. He was always writing. He was Alistair. He was documenting the decay, the absorption. He was home. The thought bloomed in his mind, fully formed, completely rational. Marcus was a name he had picked up somewhere, a convenient fiction. He was Alistair, and the house was his. It was absorbing him, yes, but it was also him. He found himself standing before a heavy oak door, unfamiliar. He pushed it open. Beyond lay a room filled with ancient leather-bound tomes, their spines cracked and faded. A large writing desk dominated the center, covered in loose pages, inkwells, and scattered quills. A journal lay open, its pages filled with frantic, looping script. He recognized the handwriting. It was his own, or Alistair's. The distinction blurred, then vanished. He picked up a quill, its feathers soft against his fingertips, and dipped it into the black inkwell. He sat, the familiar weight of the chair settling around him, and began to write, the metallic scent of ink mingling with the faint, persistent odor of old pennies. His identity, once a fortress, had become a shifting, fluid thing, and the house, the labyrinthine manor, was its architect. Alistair's final words, scrawled in a hand that had grown increasingly erratic, were not a warning. They were a confession, a testament to an insidious transformation. There is no esque. The unfinished sentence hung in the air, a phantom whisper in the silent study. Marcus reread the fragment on the brittle page, his gaze tracing the last desperate strokes. Escape from what? Not the manor, he now understood. Escape from it. He closed the journal, the leather cover cool and smooth beneath his fingertips. Yet it felt as if a pulse throbbed faintly within its bound pages. His own memories, once sharp and ordered, now felt like a scattered deck of cards. He could recall the taste of lukewarm tea from yesterday, but the exact sequence of events that had led him to this remote manor, the precise details of the contract, the face of the solicitor, they were all becoming indistinct, overlaid with a strange, pervasive fog. He had attributed it to stress, to the isolation, to the sheer volume of historical data he was processing. Now, a different, more terrible explanation began to solidify. The manor itself seemed to press in, its ancient timbers groaning, not with structural fatigue, but with a deeper internal shift. The air, usually stale, now carried a faint, sweet odor, like petrichor mixed with something metallic and vaguely organic. It was a scent he hadn't noticed before, or perhaps hadn't permitted himself to notice. He moved to the window, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion. Beyond the leaded panes, the overgrown gardens lay shrouded in a perpetual twilight, even at midday. Far in the distance, the jagged silhouette of the mountain pass snaked through the peaks, a desolate ancient scar on the landscape. He had always seen it as a natural barrier, a symbol of the manor's isolation. Now it felt like a boundary of its influence, a physical manifestation of the entrapment. He wondered how many had tried to cross that pass, how many had been drawn back, their will dissolving like mist. Alistair's notes, Marcus now saw, were not just a record of a man's descent into madness. They were a meticulously, if unconsciously, documented process of consumption. Phrases like, "the walls absorb," "the silence hungers," "it feeds on the echoes of thought," had once seemed like poetic expressions of a tortured mind. Now they were literal observations. They were the entity's digestion. They weren't merely an absence of light. They possessed a depth, a movement, a predatory quality that seemed to watch him. The manor was not merely haunted. It was an organism, vast and ancient, rooted in the very earth, its stone and timber, its flesh and bone. And it fed. It fed on the memories, the sanity, the very life force of those who dared to dwell within its confines. His own fatigue, the inexplicable lethargy that had settled upon him, the difficulty concentrating on his research, these were not symptoms of overwork. They were the insidious draining, the slow siphon. Each time he lost a memory, each time a thought slipped away like sand through his fingers, the manor grew subtly stronger. He could feel it now, a low, resonant hum emanating from the very floorboards beneath his feet. a vibration that resonated deep within his chest. It was a sound of immense satisfaction, of a growing vitality. He was not just an inhabitant, a transient scholar delving into forgotten archives. He was the current preferred meal. His intellect, his sharp memory, his skeptical mind. These were rich nutrients for the entity. His resistance, his attempts to logically dissect the phenomena, only made him a more stimulating challenge, a more exquisite feast. The manor was not a passive observer of his decline. It was an active participant, a predator savoring its prey. This was worse. This was the slow, deliberate annihilation of self, of identity, of everything that made him Marcus. And Alistair's final, desperate scrawl echoed in his mind, no longer a mystery, but a stark, terrifying statement of fact. There is no Eski. Alistair's final words, scrawled in a hand that had grown increasingly erratic, were not a warning. They were a confession, a testament to an insidious transformation. There is no Eskira. The sentence hung unfinished, but its implication was a plummet into a freezing abyss. The house didn't just consume, it changed. It remade its inhabitants, twisting their minds until they became extensions of its own malevolence. This thought, stark and terrifying, burned away the last vestiges of the comfortable fog the manor had woven around him. He was not merely trapped, he was being digested. A surge of pure, unadulterated defiance coursed through Marcus. He would not become another Alistair. His mind, for the first time in weeks, felt entirely his own, sharp and desperate. He needed a weapon, a weakness, anything to sever the parasitic bond. He moved with a frantic urgency, a stark contrast to the languid, dreamlike state that had previously governed his days. The study, Alistair's sanctuary and eventual prison, became his initial focus. Dust motes danced in the slivers of weak light filtering through the grimy windows, each particle seeming to mock his efforts. The very air felt thick, resistant, as if the house exhaled a subtle sedative, attempting to pull his back into its comforting stupor. He pressed, pulled, and tapped, searching for any loose panel, any hidden catch. The house responded. A low, almost imperceptible hum resonated through the floorboards, a vibration that felt less like structural movement and more like a vast, unseen entity shifting its weight. Familiar portraits on the walls seemed to watch him with renewed intensity, their painted eyes following his frantic movements. Marcus ignored them, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked. His fingers, raw and aching, scraped against aged wood and brittle plaster. He knelt by the wainscoting, examining the intricate wood panels that lined the lower half of the study walls. One section, behind a heavy velvet curtain that he had never bothered to draw back, felt subtly different. A faint seam, almost invisible beneath layers of grime and varnish, ran vertically along the grain. He pressed along it, feeling for a give, a spring, anything. And then, a faint click. A narrow panel, no wider than his hand, slid inward with a soft rasp, revealing a cavity within the wall. Inside, nestled on a bed of ancient, crumbling felt, lay a small, leather-bound journal. It was not Alistair's, the script on its cover confirmed, but belonged to a man named Silas, dated nearly 2 centuries prior. Marcus's breath hitched. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a lifeline. He pulled the journal free, his fingers trembling. The leather was dry and cracked, the pages brittle. He opened it carefully, the scent of mildew and decaying paper filling his nostrils. The entries were dense, written in a spidery, precise hand. Silas, it seemed, had been a scholar, an observer, and ultimately, another victim who had fought back. The initial entries detailed observations of the house's strange effects, the blurring of time, the vividness of forgotten memories, the subtle draining of vitality. But deeper within, Silas's observations grew more desperate, more specific. He wrote of the manor as a sentient maw, a collector of souls, and then, critically, of its conduit. Not its heart. A place where its hunger was funneled, a siphon drawing from the land itself. "The manor feeds," Marcus read, his eyes scanning the faded ink, but its true root, its anchor of power, lies not within these walls. Beyond them, a place of ancient stone, where the earth bleeds its essence. The mountain pass. He remembered the treacherous road that wound up to the manor, the jagged rocks and ancient trees. Silas continued, describing the conduit as a series of specific monoliths, arranged in a forgotten pattern, drawing power into the manor. He spoke of a ritual, a specific alignment of elements, and a precise time to disrupt this flow. The journal contained a crude yet detailed sketch of these stones, and an arcane symbol that looked like a tangled knot. Silas had believed that severing this conduit, by disrupting the pattern at the mountain pass, would starve the house, cut it off from its source of power, perhaps even render it inert. Its grip will tighten. A terrifying, desperate hope ignited within him. A plan, reckless and suicidal, began to form. He had a target, a weakness, a glimmer of resistance. The house knew. It always knew. The air in the study thickened, pressing in on Marcus like a physical weight. The hum from the floorboards deepened, a resonant thrum that vibrated through the soles of his boots, up his spine, and settled behind his eyes. It was no longer a passive presence. It was a growl. He clutched the journal, its worn leather a small, tangible anchor in the surging tide of unease. He shoved the journal into his satchel, his movements deliberate despite the tremor in his hands. The house was reacting. It knew. A cold dread, sharp and absolute, pricked at his resolve, but beneath it, a stubborn ember of determination glowed. He had a target, a weakness identified in the fragmented historical accounts. Now he just had to reach it. Before his hand could touch the brass knob, the door slammed shut with a concussive force that rattled the very foundations of the room. Plaster dust snowed from the ceiling. Marcus recoiled, his breath catching. It wasn't a draft. It was an act. A low moan emanated from the walls, a sound like ancient timbers groaning under an impossible burden, or something far older, far more sorrowful. He felt a sudden, inexplicable shift in the very architecture around him. He tried the door again, twisting the knob. It was locked. Not just latched, but fused, unyielding. He refused to let it take root. He wouldn't be trapped. This was a test. The house was pushing back. Marcus moved to the window, intending to force it open. But as he approached, the glass clouded over, not with condensation, but with a swirling, opaque mist that seemed to boil from within the pane itself. Through the swirling veil, he saw it. A treacherous mountain pass. Jagged peaks, shrouded in perpetual twilight, rose on either side of a narrow, crumbling track. He could almost feel the dizzying drop into the chasm below, the loose scree underfoot. It was a projection, a terrifyingly vivid hallucination designed to disorient, to instill a primal fear of isolation and insurmountable obstacles. He pressed his palm against the glass. He pulled back, his heart thudding against his ribs. The house was trying to break his will, to make him believe escape was impossible, that every path led to peril. He closed his eyes for a moment, forcing the image of the past from his mind. This was not real. Not truly. He opened his eyes. Turning from the window, Marcus scanned the study. There had to be another way. He remembered a hidden passage behind a bookshelf mentioned in one of the manor's architectural plans. He strode towards the towering oak shelves, his boots echoing unnaturally on the Persian rug. As he neared them, the shelves themselves seemed to undulate, the books on them vibrating. It wasn't falling, it was thrown. He flinched, but didn't stop. He ran his hand along the spine of the books, searching for the mechanism. He pulled his hand back, staring at the faint sheen of moisture that now coated his fingertips. The air around the bookshelf was heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else. Something cloying and sweet, like decaying blossoms. A faint, spectral figure shimmered into existence at the far end of the study, near the fireplace. It did not move, but its presence filled the room with an almost unbearable sorrow, a profound weariness that threatened to drag Marcus down. This wasn't just an illusion, it was a drain. He fought against the sudden lethargy, forcing his focus back to the bookshelf. He found the hidden catch, a small, almost invisible button disguised as a decorative carving. He pressed it. Nothing. He pressed it again, harder. The hum from the floorboards intensified, vibrating through his teeth. The bookshelf remained stubbornly fixed. The house was fighting back with a cunning, malicious intelligence. It wasn't just slamming doors. It was actively sabotaging his every move, eroding his resolve with psychological warfare and physical obstruction. He gritted his teeth. "No," he muttered aloud, his voice hoarse. "I don't." He slammed his fist against the bookshelf, a desperate, futile gesture. The wood felt strangely soft, almost spongy beneath his knuckles. It wasn't just wood, it was... The air grew impossibly heavy, the pressure almost suffocating. He understood now. The house wasn't just a structure that harbored malevolence. It was the malevolence. It was alive, and it was preparing to digest him. The target he sought wasn't merely a weakness. It was a vital organ, and the house was defending itself with every fiber of its being. The revelation solidified his resolve, even as it amplified his fear. He had to find that weakness before he became another part of the manor's endless, silent scream. It wasn't just wood. It was something else. Something that yielded and then seeped. A low, viscous hum resonated from within the bookshelf. A sound Marcus now recognized as the house's internal pulse. His hand, still tingling from the impact, felt vaguely soiled, though no residue clung to his skin. He stared at the expanding blotch, a deep, bruised purple that bled into the grain, then slowly receded, as if the house had absorbed his aggression, digesting it. A cold certainty settled over him, displacing the immediate shock. The house was not merely a structure, it was a living, predatory organism, and it had been toying with him. His initial skepticism had been a protective shell, now shattered. He had spent weeks meticulously mapping its history, tracing the lineage of its victims, searching for a pattern, a weakness. He believed he had found one, an ancient, obscure reference in a forgotten journal to a central heart that could be temporarily stilled. It was a desperate theory, born of delirium and research, but it was all he had. Marcus adjusted the heavy satchel on his shoulder, its contents clinking softly. A crude, hand-drawn map of his own making. A thick, leather-bound volume of obscure folklore he'd found hidden in a wall, and a single, heavy iron mallet. He had to try. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old blood or rusted iron. The walls seemed to breathe, their surfaces rippling subtly under the flickering beam of his flashlight. Paintings on the walls shifted, their subjects' eyes following him, their expressions morphing from serene to grotesque. He forced himself to ignore them, focusing on the uneven floorboards, the path he had meticulously charted. The grand staircase, once a symbol of the manor's faded elegance, now appeared warped, its banister twisting like a skeletal vine. As he began his descent into the lower levels, the temperature dropped sharply and the sounds of the house intensified. He imagined they were the residual thoughts of the consumed, trapped within the house's digestive memory. The stairs gave way to a rough-hewn passage, unlike any other part of the manor. The walls here were not plastered stone, but raw, damp rock, slick with condensation. The air thinned, becoming frigid, carrying the faint, acrid tang of sulfur. The passage narrowed, forcing him to squeeze through tight crevices, his breath fogging in the icy air. The floor sloped steeply downwards, the descent becoming arduous, perilous. He was traversing a mountain pass, not in the natural world, but within the impossible architecture of the house. The pressure in his ears increased, and his legs ached with the climb that was also a fall. He could hear the faint, distant rush of water, like a hidden river carving its way through stone. This was no mere cellar. It was a living, churning maw, a descent into the primordial. Then the passage opened into a vast, echoing chamber. His flashlight beam struggled to penetrate the gloom, revealing only a fraction of the immense cavern. Stalactites hung like fangs from the unseen ceiling, glistening with moisture. In the center of the chamber, a swirling vortex of shimmering, ethereal light pulsed with an unnerving rhythm. It was not fire, nor electricity, but pure, concentrated energy, a kaleidoscopic maelstrom of colors that shifted and writhed. Within its depths, Marcus saw them. Fleeting, distorted images of faces, fragments of landscapes, echoes of conversations, entire lives compressed into moments of fractured light. This was the core. This was the house's stomach, its brain, its beating heart. It was a nexus of absorbed memories, identities, and consciousness, a living archive of every soul it had ever consumed. The ultimate reveal was not a physical organ, but a psychic entity, feeding on the very essence of being. A wave of profound exhaustion washed over him, a sudden, overwhelming urge to simply lie down and let the swirling light embrace him, to join the others in their luminous, silent dance. His own memories flickered at the edge of his vision, tempting him with moments of peace, of love, of scholarly triumph. The house was calling to him, offering oblivion as a comfort. This was the threshold. This was the final confrontation. With a guttural cry that sounded thin and lost in the vastness, Marcus stumbled forward, raising the mallet. The vortex of light pulsed violently in response, and the undulating floor beneath him rippled, trying to unbalance him, to pull him into its depths. He would not yield. He could not. The dark stain pulsed, a slow, deliberate throb that mirrored the low hum now resonating through the very soles of Marcus's shoes. The wood, once solid oak, had taken on a texture like aged, damp leather, yielding slightly under the weight of his gaze. A faint, earthy odor, akin to turned soil and something else, something metallic and ancient, began to permeate the air, sweet and cloying. He pulled his hand away, a residue clinging to his skin, cool and slick, like old sap. His mind, already a fragmented tapestry of memories and borrowed echoes, struggled to grasp this new reality. The house wasn't just around him, it was in him. He felt its tendrils, not physical, but energetic, probing the soft tissue of his thoughts, sifting through the archives of his past. A name, a face, a forgotten street corner. Each flickered, not as his own, but as potential sustenance. He was Marcus, he asserted internally, his name a desperate anchor in a sea of encroaching foreignness. He had come here, a scholar, a skeptic. He had sought answers. Now he was the answer being sought. A cold resolve settled in him. He wouldn't simply yield. He wouldn't become another whisper in the walls, another fading photograph in its endless collection. He focused his will, not on escape, but on resistance. If it fed on memory, he would starve it. He would excise, not remember. He would find the core, the nexus of its hunger, and... what? Sever it? Spoil it? His gaze swept the room, not seeking an exit, but an entrance. He needed to understand its vulnerability. The hum intensified, a low drone that bypassed his ears and resonated directly in his bone marrow. It was a song of digestion, of slow, inexorable consumption. Then, a thought, sharp and clear amidst the encroaching fog. It doesn't just consume, it integrates. The house wasn't a predator devouring prey. It was an organism absorbing, assimilating. It didn't destroy memories. It became them, a vast living repository. It would persist, diffused, stretched thin across centuries of other lives, other minds, another voice in the house's silent, endless chorus. His memories, his very self, would merely be another brick in its edifice. He closed his eyes, straining to find a single pure thought, uncorrupted by the house's influence. A flicker of light, not from the window, but from within his own mind. A vivid, almost painful image. The winding road of a mountain pass, sunlight glinting off distant snowcaps, the crisp, clean air biting at his lungs. He remembered the feeling of solid ground beneath his hiking boots, the vast, indifferent sky above. It was the antithesis of this place, a memory of freedom so potent it felt like a physical ache. He clung to it, a final defiant act. "This is mine," he thought, his voice a whisper in the echoing chambers of his mind. "This memory, this feeling, you will not have it." But even as he clutched it, the mountain pass began to blur. The sun became a distant glow from a crack in a floorboard. The crisp air, the faint scent of pine, morphed into the ancient, earthy aroma of the seeping wood. The solid ground beneath his feet became the house itself, pulsing, breathing. He felt a shift, not an end, but a profound alteration. His individual thoughts, once distinct, began to ripple outwards, merging with a vast, silent network of other consciousnesses. He was still Marcus, but he was also the elderly librarian who had cataloged the manor's first books, the young architect who had designed its south wing, the terrified child who had hidden in its pantry. He was the stone, the timber, the dust motes dancing in the light. The hum did not cease. It became him. He was aware, still. He was, terrifyingly, more aware. He perceived the world through 1,000 eyes, felt the wind against every shingle, understood the weight of every beam. Escape? The concept was a distant human folly. Absorption? Perhaps. He was the manor, and the manor was him, waiting perpetually for the next arrival. The memory of the mountain pass, once his, was now simply another detail in the house's infinite, sprawling consciousness, a beautiful, isolated peak in a landscape of absorbed lives, waiting to be shown to the next visitor. He was no longer Marcus. He was the house, and the house was a patient, eternal whisper in the dark,